The Queen of a Distant Country by John Braine, continued. Miranda, I said, my eyes passing the information of a shape on the sofa to my brain, and my brain on the evidence of former visits to the room interpreting the white shape as Miranda. Miranda, I've got to give you this. The check in my hand, I went towards the sofa. There was now a smell which, in a puzzled way, my brain interpreted as the smell of the beach at low tide, and then, for what seemed like full 5 minutes, but in fact would have been no more than 5 seconds, received the information that Miranda was with Ralph Thorelby on the sofa, and they were both naked. Ralph's head jerked up towards me. Miranda was wearing a gold chain and cross, and there was a small sickle-shaped birthmark beneath her left breast, and there was a heap of clothes at the foot of the sofa. I put the check on the coffee table and walked out. I think that Miranda called out my name, but my soria had begun to throb, and I felt sick again. Outside in the fresh air, the sickness passed, but my ear still hurt. I found out the next day that the perforation had been reopened. I stared at the tennis court. The new moon had come out from behind the clouds, and I could distinguish the colors of the flowers in the rock borders on the lawn behind it. I only knew that I had been betrayed, that I'd lost the most valuable possession that I had ever had, that I was debted irretrievably, that I had somehow lost my manhood, and all the time my memory was fitting events, trivial and disregarded at the time, into the conclusion of the two naked bodies on the sofa, and the cold part of me was noting all that I saw and smelled and heard and touched, all to be stored away for the future. Chapter 16. A huge drunken man is lurching along the pavement. His fists are clenched, and he dribbles obscenities. His face, low forehead, bloodshot eyes, unshaven jowls, blackened teeth, is contorted with hate. His blood-stained shirt is torn open at the neck. The knot of his tie is behind his ear. There is a razor slash across his cheek. His muscles strain the cheap cloth of his jacket. He stinks of sweat and vomit. He doesn't look where he's going, but everyone makes way for him. No one who looks at him feels safe until they're out of his sight. If he notices anyone, man, woman, or child, he'll knock them down and deliberately, ponderously, kick them to death. He is, as the saying goes, spoiling for a fight. He would, as the saying goes, kill you as soon as look at you. That is my image of God. If I were to have a prayer, it would be, please God, don't single me out. Please, God, leave me alone. And he has left me alone. I've had a marvelous life. I have a marvelous life now. Mine is a success story, and let there be no doubt about it. And let there be no doubt about success being thoroughly enjoyable, about champagne being nicer than beer, and caviar than frozen fish fingers. Ever since the publication of my first novel, I've been one of our society's pampered darlings, and I've relished every moment of it. Was it simply a question, though, of God leaving me alone? Isn't there a further development of the image? The scowl on the drunk's face is replaced by a smile. The big, hard hand shakes yours. The heavy arm drops affectionately on your shoulder. You're his dear old friend. He drags you into the nearest bar, plies you with double brandies, gives you a large cigar, invites a couple of girls to the table, looks at you with brimming eyes and swears that all he has is yours, and presses a bulging wallet into your hand to prove it. Men in that state can go as easily in one direction as the other. His liking has nothing to do with merit, or even with you liking him. But if it ends at this very moment, if his mood suddenly changes, and I find myself, so to speak, flat on the floor amidst broken glass, his foot descending on my face, then there have been more than 20 years which were more good than bad, and 4 of them almost without flaw. There are some things I have missed. I remember once when I was staying with Morris and Maureen in their little house near Chertsey. There was a fair-sized garden at the back, which my bedroom overlooked. Beyond the garden was a woods, mostly conifers. It was a fine June morning, a little cold for the time of year. I woke early and couldn't get to sleep again. The window was open and the smell of grass and pines blew in. I was working on Vanguard at that time and shared a flat off Holland Road with 2 other journalists. The house was so new that the plaster hadn't dried out yet, with its single divan bed and cream bedside table and wardrobe and dressing table. It should have been bare and cheerless, but wasn't. It was my room in the flat off Holland Road which now seemed bare and cheerless in comparison. I went downstairs and made tea in the tiny kitchen. I had borrowed a pair of Morris's pyjamas and had to roll the bottoms up. I was wearing his woolen dressing gown, which again was too big for me, but I was glad of its warmth. I took the tray upstairs and knocked at Morris and Maureen's bedroom door. When I entered, their 5-year-old daughter, Sarah, was lying between them. They each had an arm round her. She was a sturdy, round-faced child with fair hair. She had bright yellow pyjamas on and was awake and smiling. "She always comes in at 7, Maureen said. "Our little alarm clock." Morris yawned. Sarah ran her fingers over his chin. "Gosh, I've got a hangover," he said. "You darn bachelors." What moved me almost to tears was their unity, their vulnerability, their vast simplicity and innocence. I felt incomplete looking at them, cold and lonely and sterile. I was finishing my first novel then, and it kept me in a state of more or less permanent euphoria. But as I looked at the 3 of them, I wasn't any longer aware of what I had got, but of what I hadn't got. It was shortly after that I met Jean, with marriage in my mind, but I suspect now the wrong kind of marriage. Whatever it was that I felt to exist between Morris and Sarah and Maureen was never there for us. I remember another family who sat opposite me on the tube, a dowdy couple in their late 40s with a daughter in her 20s. It was a Friday night, and each had full carrier bags. It was last summer. The husband had a cream linen jacket and grey flannels and open sandals and grey socks. His wife and daughter had print dresses and cardigans. All 3 wore spectacles, the mother and daughter, those of the harlequin kind, which might perhaps do something for a pretty girl, but did nothing for them except to underline their extreme plainness. I could, in my mind's eye, see the semi-detached house, not, I thought, a council house, in Harrow or Wembley, one of the long row of similar houses, each with its neat little front garden, each different, in some way trifling to the casual observer, but all important to its owner, and, absurdly and touchingly, having names rather than numbers. They didn't speak to each other, but I felt, on no other evidence but my instincts, that they were happy and complete, that they'd be tired from their small festival of a day's shopping in the West End, that they'd be looking forward to a drink of tea and unpacking their purchases. The wife had a carrier from C&A's. I could imagine the long, pleasurable rite of selection, Women appreciate the importance of money, which, after all, is the tangible representation of so many hours of our life, and of material things far more intensely than men. I don't suppose it's likely that I'll ever see them again, or that our paths will ever cross, but for days afterwards, and even now, they stick in my mind. What they had was what Morris and Sarah and Maureen had, and what I, because I'm the sort of person I am, have never had. They were a family. They loved each other without complication. They were safe and warm as long as God didn't decide to put the boot in. And I, like all pampered darlings, want what I haven't got expressly, and especially since someone else has it. The rich man's envious of the poor man's one ewe lamb. The envy is ephemeral. I'm essentially lonely. I have few friends. It might almost be said that I live without human love. But it's what I've chosen, or, rather, what Miranda helped me to choose. Looking back over the 20 years since leaving Anglesey, I can see now that my life has been as if planned by her at every stage. There were the bad moments. After I burst in upon her and Ralph, I went through the worst period of depression in my whole life. It wasn't made any easier to bear by the pain I had from my damaged ear, which cost me a month of sleepless nights. I can't say that I felt any guilt about Cora, and my beating up seemed to have made us even. The nearest I came to guilt was that now and again what my father had said would lodge itself unbidden in my mind. If he'd been as sensible as me, I wouldn't have been born. Mostly, though, what I had in my mind was Miranda. I wasn't in the least bothered by her being unfaithful to Max, who was, so far as I was concerned, a non-person. Jealousy may have had something to do with it. I didn't want her to give any time to anyone except me, and she was, of course, to use psychological jargon is unavoidable, a mother figure profaned. At that age, naturally, I didn't care whether she had sexual needs, much less whether Ralph had. Perhaps I would have been hurt less if I'd thought that she was overcome by passion, but I suspected that she was administering sex therapeutically, that she was trying to straighten Ralph out, and even at 19 I was adult enough to know that people are best left alone, no matter how untidy or sordid their lives may appear, that they're settled and cozy in their particular slum, near the shops and the pubs and the bingo parlours, always with something going on, and if you transfer them to a brand-new flat in a brand-new high-rise block at a rent they can't afford, they'll be desperately isolated, staring out of the 20th floor over a wind-swept wasteland, and probably will be blown to pieces by the brand-new high-efficiency central heating system into the bargain. I doubt if I put it together as neatly as this at the time, for on top of it all I had to cope with the usual glandular turmoils of 19. These are the same for every generation, nor do I want to remember in detail how depressed I was. I hadn't been through it before, so I couldn't visualize it coming to an end. I didn't go out very much, and not at all to the cobble. I didn't want to see anyone who knew me, least of all Miranda. To do him justice, there were no recriminations from my father. Indeed, I think in a way he was rather proud of me, as being a chip off the old block, a bit of a lad. And Hetty looked upon the Cora affair with an amused indulgence. It was what you'd expect from a boy of 19. I went to the shop with a black patch over my eye, took a great many aspirins to keep off the pain in my ear, went to the cinema a great deal, read a great deal, began many articles, and finished none. Amelia was my great consolation, though I naturally didn't tell her about Cora. The only time when I wasn't actively depressed, in fact, was when she was sitting on my knee looking at TV, or I was sitting on her bed telling her a story, but even this could hurt. Sometimes, when I was finally dropping off to sleep at night, my ear still throbbing, I would awaken with a start, seeing the small, thin body mangled under a car, a small hand emerging from a stormy sea and disappearing, hearing a thin, little voice carried away by the wind. That was when I first began to hate God, and when I determined to do without love as far as I was able. I can't set a date to this decision. It was a gut decision rather than a conscious decision. But once I'd made it, the depression began to lift and the pain in my ear went away. One evening, I think it must have been mid-June, I told my father that I wanted to leave Anglesey. He turned the TV off. "I was watching it," Hetty said. "You are bloody well knitting. It's a load of crap, anyway." He pointed towards the kitchen. "Make us some tea, love." Hetty got up and went out without a word. This puzzled me a little at the time, but it doesn't now. She could already see Lester in my place in the shop. "I can't stick it here any more," I said. "You don't have to go for me, and if Cora's father gets awkward, I'll pause the bugger senseless, big though he is." I'd have gone anyway. I think you would have gone away, even without that Aberwick woman to make you discontented. You don't really belong here. God knows where you do belong. Pity you won't be going into the forces." He looked at me with a bleak affection. "Won't do you any harm to stand on your own 2 feet. Not that you'll be going all that far away." Not far away? For I already had a vision of London and a new life which was somehow to be, against all logic, a facsimile of Miranda's Chelsea phase after the publication of Moving Through. "I had a word with your grandfather, Knossington, sanctimonious old bugger. He's been pulling strings, he and a few other bloody Knossingtons. You're to see the editor of the Charbury Gazette." "You might have told me." "You might have told me when you got Cora into trouble. Cuts both ways. You don't have to see the editor. Get some bloody awful job in London, if you like." I had the same helpless feeling that I had as a child. I would ask my grandfather Knossington for money, for the cinema or circus or sweets, and the large head would turn slowly towards me and consider the request in silence, the pale blue eyes frowning under the heavy dark eyebrows, the deep creases from the nose to the corners of the mouth deepening still further. The decision would be declined in a monosyllable, and the head would turn away from me. And if I disagreed with his decision, there was no point in argument. He just wasn't interested. "That's it, then," I said. "The Knossingtons want you out, lad." I suppose I should thank him. "I'm afraid he doesn't want to see you, Tom." My father's tone was unusually gentle. "He never liked me anyway," I said bitterly. "It isn't you he doesn't like, it's me. Bad blood," the old sod said to me. "There's bad blood in that lad." "I know damned well whose bad blood he means." He laughed. "Don't look so woe-begone. Funny thing, if you'd been a good lad and not put a bun in Cora's oven, he'd have done nothing for you. But you were a bad lad, and went at her hammer and tongs. So the old bugger sets to thinking, what's the one thing you want, the one thing that'll shift you out of Anglesey. I don't know what the moral of that is." The one thing you want. Despite my dreams of London, I was well aware, thanks to Miranda, that one didn't get a job in Fleet Street without provincial experience. A job on the Gazette would be exactly what she'd planned for me. But she hadn't got me the job. I'd got it by having sexual intercourse with Cora. The moral, and a subsidiary theme in my first novel, and the primary theme in my second, was that we're not rewarded according to our merits, that the wicked, or at any rate the reckless and sensual and selfish, shall flourish like the green bay tree. From that evening on, my life without Miranda began. As I look through the storehouse, pulling out reel after reel of unedited film, I congratulate myself on my thrift. There is so much I haven't used yet, more than enough for the rest of my life. There are the 4 years in Charbury, the 6 years on the staff of the Vanguard, the 2 years in Fleet Street on the Argus. Then there's my marriage in 1964, the year of the publication of my first novel, and my divorce 5 years afterward. Come to that, there are my early years in Charbury and Anglesey. It's like discovering substantial bank accounts one has forgotten. I did see Miranda again after leaving Anglesey, but only once, for in the winter of 1953, Max, by some foreign exchange legerdemain, of the kind I can never quite understand, acquired a villa in the south of France, and she began to spend more and more time there. And when I visited Anglesey, I spent most of my time with my father and Hetty and Amelia. Later, when I bought my house after the publication of my novel, I preferred to have them stay with me. From the time that Max died in 1965 to the morning that Deirdre walked out of my house, I didn't visit Anglesey at all. There had, of course, been a great deal of publicity in connection with my divorce, which didn't matter at all in London, but would have been hard to put up with in Anglesey. But that wasn't entirely the reason. There was some sort of discontent in me which I could control in London, but felt I wouldn't have been able to control in Anglesey. I told Deirdre about this recently, and she said, rather contemptuously, "You're a wonderful hand at excuses." "Excuses for what?" "Whatever it is that's on your conscience." "I've nothing on my conscience." "Nothing to congratulate yourself for either." "I've not done so badly for a boy who left school at 15. "And did it all by yourself?" Her voice was flat. "Yes, all by my bloody self, me and no one else." I knew it wasn't true even as I said it. I used the phrase, my life without Miranda, without hesitation. But have I really lived without her? Hasn't my life, from the time I met her, run along the lines planned by her? Does it make any difference to the soldier in action that the general who planned the battle isn't actually by his side? Yes, I had plenty of excuses for not keeping in touch with her, of course. My shock at discovering her with Ralph did me good service for some 4 years. I couldn't see her as Miranda any longer, but merely as a pair of big, slack breasts with big tobacco-brown nipples. I didn't, or so I told myself, respect her any more. I couldn't be at my ease with her. Then she had a drinking problem for about 6 years. That would be the time I left the Gazette to go to the Vanguard. It was my father, oddly enough, who made me aware of her problem, reminded me, in fact, of her existence on my second visit home from London. I go to that part of the storehouse with reluctance, take out the dusty reel of film, set up the projector. Saturday evening, a warm June. There are new orange and yellow curtains on the living room windows, and a new cherry-coloured fitted carpet, and a new three-piece suite, pale fawn moquette, rather too big for the room. Hetty is knitting. Amelia, tall and leggy now, is reading Anne of Green Gables. My father is reading the paper. Lester is brushing his shoes in the kitchen. "You don't seem to see anything of Mrs. Aberwick now," my father says. "She's always away." "Doesn't stop you phoning her now?" It was an order. I edit the rest of the reel. Miranda was there, in the lounge parlour at the Cobble, and so was the gang. But it was a new gang. Out of the 14 people there with Miranda, I only knew Ralph Thorelby. The new members seemed younger than the old gang, and there were only 2 girls among them. Miranda was sitting on the upholstered bench against the wall. It had been reupholstered in shiny black material, which was a curiously accurate match of her hair in colour and texture. She was wearing more rouge than I ever remembered her using, and her white linen dress showed the division between her breasts. She had always had a certain flamboyance, but now she looked almost whorish. I liked the change no more than I liked the new gang. I sat down next to her. She kissed me, not on the cheek, as she used to do, but on the mouth. "Hello, stranger." She turned to Ralph on her other side. "Remember Tom?" "Of course I remember Tom." He smiled at me. "He's a bit of a shit, is Tom." Her voice was a little slurred. "One of nature's fascists is Tom. Doesn't remember his old friends now. Hasn't bothered to see me for 6 years. "You're a bit hard on me," I said. "No harder than you deserve, you bugger. You're a cold little sod, Tom. I always said you were. Have a drink, now that you're here, though. Everyone have a drink." Ralph whispered in her ear. "I don't give a toss," she said. "Don't be such a bloody old woman." She pressed the bell. "Ralph watches the rounds, Tom. Very bourgeois trick, that. Afraid I'll be exploited." There was an awkward silence. "How's Max?" I asked. She laughed. "Got a girlfriend. Doesn't know, I know. I think it's the last flare-up of his prostate, myself." "Shh," Ralph said. "Don't shush me in front of my friends," she said sharply. She put a finger under my chin. "I wonder why I never fancied you. Too bloody cold, that's why. You don't want me to shush, do you? Because you're taking notes, aren't you? My little Frankenstein monster." I did take notes, but I haven't used them until now. I stayed until closing time, when I helped Ralph take her to his car. She was staggering a little, which wasn't surprising, considering the amount of scotch she'd consumed. She stopped at the car. It was an old Ford Popular, I remember, one of the few small cars in which a top hat could be worn. "I've said some nasty things to you tonight," she said. "Don't let that worry you." "I want it to worry you. You're getting too bloody slick. You're in there, making it, with the images, cool and above it all." She belched. "But where the bloody hell are you? Where's the human being? Who and what do you care for?" I had had enough. I don't really know how I had stood so much all evening with the new gang, the new strange gang, listening fascinated as she told them, and anyone else in the room who cared to listen, about how much I owed to her. how I'd avoided her all these years, how she'd got me out of the mess with Cora, how false my work had become. There had been all this and much more, and I had stayed there and taken it, because I felt that, in a sense, I owed it to her, that I deserved some kind of punishment. But I had reached my limit. If I'd felt any guilt when I entered the cobble, I was certain that now I'd expiated it. If Miranda had apologized, if she'd spoken one friendly word, I should have been disarmed. I should have forgiven her, but this final attack was too much. Anger took over, and I found myself shouting at her, "Who the hell are you to talk? You bloody has-been. I earn a living from my writing, don't I? What good are you, except to get pissy-eyed with a gang of cadgers and have it off with that double-doored old creep there?" Miranda stared at me for a minute, and then slapped my face. Then she was violently sick. Ralph put his arm around her waist to hold her up. Two of the gang stood nearby, their mouths open. Neither could have been more than 19. They were identically dressed in grey flannels and navy blue blazers and white open-neck shirts. I walked straight towards them. My fist clenched, and they made way for me. It was when I was on the train back to London on the Sunday that the idea of my first novel came to me. It had nothing to do with the scene at the cobble the night before, but without the scene at the cobble, the idea wouldn't have come to me. The whole plot didn't present itself to me ready-made, but I could see two main characters, the woman in her 40s and the young man in his 20s. Miranda wasn't the woman and I wasn't the man, but the emotion between us that evening at the cobble was of the intensity the novel needed. By the time I reached King's Cross, I had half a dozen pages of notes and a very rough outline of a story. The young man would destroy the older woman, and in so doing would destroy himself. The setting would be a small town, but it wouldn't be Anglesey, and somewhere a younger woman would be involved. As I went into the tube, I was already rummaging through my storehouse for the reels marked Cora and Jane. It was simple and fortuitous, and as contrived and complex as that. It was based upon my experience and was in no way a direct transcription of my experience. It was published in 1964 when I'd left Vanguard for the Argus, and shortly before my marriage to Jean Pitlochry, who wrote for the Woman's Page. Jean was oddly, or not perhaps so oddly, since every man has a preferred sexual type, like Cora, except that she had a slight Scottish accent and was rather fuller in the figure. She was highly articulate, rather left-wing, and much in demand on TV and radio. She wasn't a big name, but she was nevertheless a name, used to being made a fuss of, to being mildly lionized. Of the two of us, up to the publication of my novel, she was the better known. Had it remained like that, we should, no doubt, have still been married. My novel altered all that. I now was not only a big name, but an international big name, and I was honored a good deal beyond my deserts. There weren't many other readable novels that year, and I continued to be a big name. The film of the novel continued my success story, and my second and third novels were respectable sellers. None of this has any connection with my merits as a writer. The point is that Jean, after a lifetime of being top of the class, right from her primary school, found herself almost overnight only occupying that position by the fact of being my wife. Even the birth of Giles made no difference. The pressmen who flocked to the nursing home were interested in Tom Metfield's wife, not Jean Pitlochry. Our divorce, 5 years after our marriage, was inevitable. The correspondent was Bob Dunsforth, an amiable young director of a family engineering firm. The real correspondent, as I've already said, was my work. And there was Miranda, however much I may have pushed her into the back of my mind. Because of what she had taught me, I was a husband and father merely in the physical sense. I was on my Todd, an outsider looking in, the day I married, and I didn't change. And throughout our courtship, if it can be called that, since on her insistence we lived together for a year before we married, and throughout our marriage and throughout the whole dreary business of divorce, I was aware I was going to use her, that our relationship was going to be filed in my storehouse. Chapter 17. What worries me about Deirdre is that I haven't been able to use her. I don't think that I ever will. I can't think about her coolly, and I don't think that I'm ever going to be able to. She makes me feel vulnerable, in the same way that Amelia made me feel vulnerable, that Giles would make me feel vulnerable if I let him enter my mind. It isn't merely sex which attracts me to her. We didn't go to bed together until we'd known each other for 2 months, and even then it didn't seem all that important. In any case, she isn't really my sexual type. Inescapably, I prefer dark-haired women, and always will. She was wrong when she said that Saturday morning in my bedroom that I only wanted her for one thing. The trouble was that she had so much more to give, and that I was frightened of taking it. I wonder now if Alec Wallersley didn't have this in mind when he first introduced us. That was at a party at his flat in Hampstead. The flat, a large, untidy one crammed with Victorian furniture and bric-a-brac, was my second home after my divorce, and the HQ of a much more successful and sophisticated metropolitan equivalent of Miranda's gang. There were always more girls than men at the parties there, and Alec, a tall and skinny man with a pointed beard, who might have been any age between 40 and 50, had a talent for acquiring those dolly girls who were in the news at the moment. I used him as the basis of my hero in my 4th novel. Our friendship was never quite the same after that. It wasn't that anyone recognized him. My hero was younger, handsomer, not a divorcee, not a journalist, and not a serious counter-revolutionary theorist with an international reputation. Our friendship remained, but I had used him, and I had used his home and the circle of friends who were, in a sense, his family. I had betrayed no secrets, publicized no confidences. The book was a work of fiction. But between friends, there's a sort of reticence, and I cannot get nearer it than that, which I hadn't preserved. Perhaps he brought Deirdre into my life precisely because he knew that I couldn't use her, so that I should be forced into a genuine human relationship for once. He looked around the company with a proprietorial air. "Hand-picked, lad," he said. "A bomb in this room, and the counter-revolution's over before it started." He looked admiringly at a giggle, or whatever the collective term is, of dolly girls in the far corner. "To use an expression of yours, the trouble with cunt, lad, is that the women have all of it." A very wise saying. Here we have a commodity which is essential to our well-being, if not to our sanity. It should be kept under lock and key and used only in limited quantities on production of a medical certificate. Yet, who has charge of it? illogical, emotional creatures who either hang on to it or give it to all and sundry. He caught sight of Deirdre's red head. "Deirdre, here's someone you were wanting to meet." He smiled. "She'll be good for you, Tom. I don't know whether you will be good for her." We didn't have the chance to talk very much that evening. She told me that she liked my second novel best of all because it made her cry and the others didn't, and we arranged to lunch at the studio of her TV company to talk about my writing something for them. "But it's only an excuse to see you again," she said, leaving me what was, for me, an unusual state of pleased embarrassment. She had the same directness as Morris's wife, Maureen, and the same way of seeming to put vitality into you instead of taking it out. I didn't take her home. She went off with the dim young man she came with, and I went to bed finally with a girl from South Vietnam who scratched me all down my back, and whom I suppose I shall use if ever any of my characters have occasion to go to bed with a girl from South Vietnam. But I lunched with Deirdre, and I wrote the play, more to prove to myself that I could do it than out of any urgent creative need. On the Saturday morning she left my house in a rage. I stayed in bed until 10, thinking about Miranda. Then I had a shower and dressed, and went into the nearby supermarket in Kensington High Street, still thinking about Miranda. For once, a colourless series of statements is entirely accurate. I've always enjoyed the minor details of living, have, in fact, come to value them more and more. I enjoy showering. I enjoy shaving. I enjoy having a huge selection of clothes. I enjoy dressing. I enjoy walking along Kensington High Street, and I enjoy choosing food in a supermarket. Normally, I would have wanted to note it all, to put down the sensation of the impact of the shower, the color of the shower curtains, the texture of the towels, to enumerate each suit, each pair of socks, each shirt. I do remember now that I chose a light blue crimpling jacket in check, a pair of navy blue slacks, a pair of yellow socks, a yellow nylon polo neck sweater, and a pair of black bally wet look casuals. Normally, also, I would have wanted to put down the sting of the aftershave, the appearance of each passer-by, the details of each building, to have enumerated every item in the supermarket, for I would have enjoyed it all, been grateful for it, and this would have been the only way for me to have praised it all. But that morning my mind was full of Miranda, and I only noticed the world outside me briefly when buying salami, bread, butter, duck pâté, Cheshire cheese, tea and coffee in the supermarket. At home, in my study, I was grateful from time to time for the comfort of the huge leather-covered sofa, switched the phone over to the answering service, and didn't touch it again until Monday. On Monday, I phoned Miranda. A man's voice, deep and hoarse, with a slight Yorkshire accent, answered. "Anglesey, 450? Who the bloody hell's that? Who? Yes, and this is Herbert Bloody Marcus." There was a gasp, as if the owner of the voice had been punched, and Miranda's voice came over. "Tom? Never mind that clown. Where are you?" "At my London residence, to which I've never been invited." "You don't need an invitation. Anyway, I'm coming to see you." "It's been a long time, you bastard." "Oh, God, Miranda, what the hell does it matter?" "You knew Max was dead?" "It's 2 years ago, love. My father told me." "You could have written. Not that he was any great loss, but you could have written." She sounded tearful. I won't come if you don't want me to. Oh, Christ, come. People tell me you're a right fascist bastard these days. Which people? I laughed. You know I don't have any politics, honey. That's what I mean. See you at the Grange tonight. She rang off. 8 hours later, I was in Anglesey, driving along Filey Road. It had been warm enough when I started to drive with the hood down, but just inside the Yorkshire border, a cold east wind had made me stop to put it up. I'd pushed the Morgan up to 120 on the M1. As I drove along the Filey Road, my cheeks were still stinging with the wind and the sun. There was a pleasure to be had from driving with the hood up, too, even now that I'd slowed down. Canvas and perspex were somehow more adventurous than steel and glass. It seemed to bring one more intimately in contact with the elements. The Grange seemed a little shabbier than when I'd last seen it. There were cracks in the tarmac of the drive. The paintwork was shabby. The lawn wasn't as yet overgrown, but it hadn't been cut regularly. Though it was daylight, the carriage lamps on either side of the door hadn't been turned off. By the courtyard was a battered Volkswagen minibus covered with slogans and transfers. Power to the people. Legalize pot. Power comes from the muzzle of the gun. Victory to the NLF. She lives. Heads of Lenin, Che, Mao, guns, grenades, flowers, and, of course, the mushroom cloud. The sky was grey now, not pearly, as it could sometimes be in this part of the world, but the grey of dirty shoddy. I began to wonder why I'd come. Ralph Thorolby answered the door. At first I didn't recognize him. He was wearing long sideboards, which further elongated his already elongated face. His skin was sallow no longer, but an even brown. I speculated upon whether it was no more genuine than the blackness of his hair, which had been speckled with grey when last I saw him. "Christ," I said, "the fastest gun in the West. What do they think of that outfit at the grammar school, Ralph?" "I've retired, my dear." He helped me off with my anorak and ran his hand lightly over my hair, which, as everyone grows theirs longer, I keep having cut shorter, so that now it's only just long enough to part. "As butch as ever, I see. Tweed jacket, the good old grey slacks, the Vaiella shirt." "Protective coloring," I said. "I can go anywhere. You can't." "I don't want to go anywhere, love." Full blast from Miranda's study came suddenly Johnny Reggae. There was a smell of dust and incense in the hall. "It used to be Wagner," I said. "A lot of things used to be." "Does she still go to the Cobble?" He shook his head. I noticed that he wore a silver identity bracelet. Too bourgeois. And there was trouble with the management. They don't like students. Not the new kind. New kind? Had you forgotten about our new university? Students, I said. Oh, Christ. They're very sweet, friendly young people. He giggled. Enlarge your experience, Ducky. The study was full of people and smoke, and a rather touchy female vocal of Johnny Reggae. It hadn't changed since I last saw it, except that there were piles of newspapers and magazines on top of the bookcases, a Sony hi-fi, and a litter of galley proofs, typescripts, and press photos on the desk. Miranda was wearing a pink linen trouser suit and gold slippers. Her face was an even brown, like Ralph's, but obviously her tan hadn't come out of a bottle. She had worn well, though the flesh at the opening of her jacket was beginning to take on the texture of crepe. Beside her, on the sofa, a big bearded man of about my age, with hair half down his shoulders, leaned back, his eyes closed, his hand resting on her crotch. I bent down and kissed her on the cheek, but she put her arms around my neck and kissed me on the lips. "Tom, it's been so long. Sit down, honey. Did you have a good journey?" She put her hand on my knee. The big, bearded man beside her didn't open his eyes or move his hand. "He has a Morgan +8 now," Ralph said, fiddling with the hi-fi control deck, which was black and chrome, with what appeared to be some 30 switches and buttons. "Conspicuous expenditure," said the bearded man, his eyes still closed. I recognized the voice which I'd heard on the phone that morning. "Waste of man-hours, waste of irreplaceable fossil fuel, waste of power." "You're absolutely right," I said, stifling a genuine yawn. "You don't want to argue?" "No." "Then fuck you." His hand had all this time been stroking Miranda's crotch. She seemed not to feel it. "This is Jim McCarthan," she said. "Jim, Tom Metfield. Don't say that you haven't heard of him." The bearded man's eyes opened and nodded at me. "I've heard of him. Put a bun in my cousin Cora's oven. Writes decadent bourgeois crap, like you used to write, Miranda." "It's a living," I said. "I don't really care very much what people think about it." "No, you don't." Johnny Reggae was displaced by a rhythmic horse yelling, which might have been Alice Cooper. The noise mounted. It didn't seem to affect anyone else in the room. "Switch it off, Ralph," Jim Carmarthen bellowed. "I hate that bloody wet dream music. The kids like it, though." Looking around, I saw that the others were indeed kids. The oldest there, a tall, thin boy in blue jeans and tie-dyed T-shirt and afro hairdo, wouldn't have been any more than 21. There were 6 boys and 3 girls. They were all in drab browns and blacks, the girls in flimsy, floor-length dresses. They didn't seem to be aware that I was looking at them. "The kids are welcome to it," I said. "How is Cora?" "She married a bookie. Wears bloody mink and rides about in a Mercedes now. Always was an aspiring bourgeois. Now she's made it." "I'm glad. She's no different from you, except that she's peddled her cunt, and you've peddled your talent." This annoyed me. I don't know why. "How's your talent?" I asked. "Any buyers? Or is it buried too deep?" The boy with the afro hairdo, another boy with a straggly fair beard, and 2 of the girls drifted over to the sofa and stood looking at us in silence. Ralph left the now silent hi-fi and stood beside the boy in the afro hairdo, his hand on his shoulder. "You mustn't be like that with Jim," Miranda said sharply. "He hasn't published in the sort of magazines you read, that's all." She squeezed Jim's hand. "He stopped me drinking and started me thinking," she giggled. "Rather trite, but good. You knew I was writing another novel, but this will be committed. Committed totally to the changing of our rotten society. I'd like to read it." "You won't really like it. I left the world of private sensation." Suddenly my mind seemed to cut out. Ralph put a glass of whiskey in my hand. I sipped it mechanically, aware of Miranda's voice, droning relentlessly on about the workers, capitalism, alienation, revolution, and, I think, Vietnam. What was literature about? What was art about, if it wasn't about private sensation? If the world was going to change in the way she said it was going to change, what would be the point in my living? The rest of the students had drifted over to the sofa. They were listening to Miranda, as I suppose I once had listened to her at the cobble. What was important to them was not what she said, or that a member of her generation should say it. And she was, in the Methodist phrase, bearing witness against the world, the flesh, and the bourgeois devil in the shape of Tom Metfield, though I wasn't, as it were, manifesting my devilishness, but sitting quietly while the hoarse voice, still with something compulsively attractive about it, went relentlessly on. She stopped and lit a cigarette, and I said mildly, "The rotten bourgeois society hasn't done badly by you, darling." "Because it's so clumsy and capricious and stupid, and I shall use what it's given me to destroy it." "We'll establish a commune," the young man with the afro hairdo said. "We'll issue pamphlets, a real socialist newspaper. We'll publish books. We'll stage plays. We'll have happenings." "Good luck to you," I said. "Miranda, I'm rather tired. Couldn't we get together some other time?" A girl in a brown dress with a rather pretty face looked at me as if she wanted to hit me. "Christ, you are a decadent shit, aren't you? Don't you care? Don't you care one way or the other? Don't you have any bloody reactions at all?" "I'm neutral. I'm just a writer. Just a worn-out old hack." "Worn-out old hack be buggered. I've read your books. Miranda taught you how to write. She wouldn't have wasted her time on a hack." "I'm neutral, dear, and bloody tired, and I've heard it all before." "You're bloody soft. You're bloody dead." She was shouting now. "Don't you have any answers?" "There is an answer," I said. "You'll find out one day, and it won't be in words." I don't know why I said it, and I'm still asking myself why, but when I'd said it, there was silence. "Miranda, I really am shagged out. I'll phone you." I stood up. She pulled me down beside her and gestured to the students. Suddenly they went there, and Jim had closed his eyes again. "You're out of touch, aren't you, Tom?" she asked gently. "I expect so." "Tom, you just want an easy life, and no one's going to have an easy life anymore. You want to celebrate the bourgeois world." "Celebrate? Yes. It's odd you should choose that word." "Oh, God, that's the point. It's there in all your stuff. It always was. You don't celebrate at a deathbed. It's dying. Your lovely bourgeois world, it started to die in 1917. Something big's happening, Tom. That's what you should celebrate." "Oh, yes, these kids here are ignorant little twats, but they know the score, and you don't. You should care about what's happening, Tom. You should be writing about it. I'm writing about it. I've come to life again. Do you understand?" She took a handful of Jim's long hair. It was nearly down to the middle of his back, and pulled his head around to face her. He opened his eyes. They were grey-blue and bloodshot. "He's only intermittently good as a poet, and he stinks like a whore's armpits. But he started me writing again." He struck her hand away and leaned back, closing his eyes again. "Leave me alone, fuck you, I'm thinking." His hand returned to Miranda's crotch. "Will it be a novel?" I asked. "Oh, Jesus, you don't speak in those terms. The form doesn't matter. You cram everything in. You're taking action. You're joining the war. I thought the communists had the answer once. That was when Harvey was a member. Used to subscribe to party funds on the quiet. Do you still? Tom, don't you know anything? We go on from Marx. They go on from Stalin. They think they're using us, but we use them. They'll have to go in the end, but first of all, your bourgeois world has to go before you build the new city, the shining city. You pull the old one down. It's all in my book. It'll be the best thing I've ever done. I was trying to keep the tears back. They were tears for the world of my youth that had seemed so secure. They were tears for Miranda's gang I'd known. Miranda's gang, Mark I. I saw now that on my last visit it had been replaced by Mark II. I hadn't liked that, but it's still been recognizably the derivation of Mark I. But Mark III was different again. Its function was to destroy my bourgeois world, past and present, my kind, gentle, beautiful bourgeois world that had every virtue but the will to live. Yes, it'll be a good book, Miranda, I said. You're a good writer. I worked it all out, she said, stroking Jim's hair absently. Society silenced me. I lost my integrity. I was thinking as an individual. I wasn't thinking historically. I lost my talent because I didn't realize what it was for. And now I've got it back. I'm sure you've never lost it. I still wanted to weep, but another part of me was watching and listening, cold and dry-eyed. Yes, I've got it back, she said. But what did I do to you? I turned you into a successful bourgeois. Damn you! You're not even a reactionary bourgeois. You haven't even the guts to be a fascist bastard. You don't give a damn, do you? That was a good question, I thought. Was I so much a part of that world that I'd lost my will to live too? No, Miranda, I don't give a damn. Politics bores me stiff. I'm just a writer. Something about her seemed to slacken. You shouldn't, she whispered. For a second she seemed all of her 60 years, her face a chaos of deep lines. I looked at her with a helpless love. Shouldn't what, Miranda? Her face was taut again. Nothing, darling. Have another drink. I shook my head and got up. My desire to weep had left me. I kissed her forehead. It was very dry and hot. I'll see you. She didn't answer. As I went out of the room, Ralph left the young man with the afro hairdo and put his hand on my arm. I'm sorry you had a rough passage. It might be rougher for you than for me in the end. He smiled. My dear, they're surprisingly tolerant. They really are. All for doing your own thing, as they put it. Don't be sorry for me. I'm just a little puzzled. This really isn't your scene, is it? His hand was still on my arm. He led me into the hall and picked up my anorak. It's better than being lonely, he said, helping me into the anorak. He opened the door. It was still light, but there was a faint red glow in the west. The wind was very cold. I was aware that I was being shown out, that he'd been given his orders without a word being spoken. But he was a link with the past I didn't want to break. He spoke a language which I might not hear again. What about her sons? I asked. They're in London. Young Max is barrister, Donaldson accountant. They were never very close. He frowned, holding the door open. It really is cold, darling. I went through the door, then turned as he was about to shut it. "Ralph, will you give Miranda a message for me?" "Make it short, pet. My balls are frozen off me." "She'll have the book. Power, to his companion force, and to their prisoner, Prometheus. Wait, Ralph. Power says, we have come to the last path of the world in the Scythian country, in the untrodden solitude." "Very pretty," he giggled. "You're a fool, Tom. I never liked you." He slammed the door shut. Chapter 18, the last chapter. When I returned to Kensington, I was seized with apathy. I opened no letters, kept the phone switched on to the answering service, and did no work, lying in bed all morning, wandering about Kensington all afternoon, and lying on the sofa in the study all evening. I drank no alcohol because, for some reason, it seemed necessary to keep my mind clear. I suppose that what I really did was to hole up, to go to earth, to lick my wounds in my cozy little burrow. It was unseasonably cold that May, with summer clothes piling up unwanted in the shops, and pictures of deserted beaches in the papers, which helped to add to a pervading sense of unreality which I couldn't shake off and didn't want to try. My house was in what estate agents describe as a favoured area of Kensington, near St. Mary Abbots, in a terrace built in the 1880s. I was very fond of it, but began to have the feeling that when I opened the front door, there would be a black void behind it. This only lasted a split second, but left me a little shaken after it had gone. And sometimes I would anticipate, before going into my study, that it would have someone in it whom I would not wish to see. Lying on the sofa, I would see a facsimile of Miranda's study at the Grange. It would again be a split second before I came back to normal, realize that it was half the size, that the wallpaper and carpet were orange and yellow, and that there were yellow Venetian blinds and not curtains, that there was a Victorian Davenport instead of a massive mahogany desk, and photos of my father and mother and Amelia instead of the portrait of Miranda. I wasn't, as they say, losing my marbles. It was simply that at the hands of Miranda and her new gang, I had the same beating up, psychologically, as I once had physically from Cora's father, and just as I'd recovered from that beating up, so I recovered from this. It was on the fourth evening after my return from Anglesey. I was lying, half asleep, on the study sofa, when suddenly I was awake and on my feet, walking over to the phone in almost the same movement and calling Deirdre. I had let go. I had relaxed. I had rested. I was going forward now, certainly not in the assurance of victory, but forward and not alone. There was no answer. I stood, staring at Amelia's photo for a few moments, then went back to the phone and asked for international service. Amelia had become a nurse after leaving school, married a young doctor in Scarborough, and they'd emigrated to Canada a year after they married. She'd grown up tall and leggy, with a thin, lively face and tranquil eyes. I hadn't seen her since she'd emigrated, and that, I realized with a shock, was 4 years ago. Her voice was high, eager, slightly breathless, with a slight Yorkshire accent. It hadn't changed, and what I felt for her hadn't changed. "I'm coming to see you," I said. "Lovely. When?" "Next week." "Are you on a lecture tour?" "I'm just coming to see you, and Simon, and the twins." "I'll tell them about you, how clever you are, and how you used to tell me stories when I was a little girl. Oh, Tom, I'm so happy you're coming. I could cry." "Don't do that, Doy," I said, feeling close to tears myself. "I'll phone you again tomorrow, and we'll arrange the details." "Oh, Tom, it's so lovely. I can't believe it." "I should have come before," I said. "It doesn't matter, Tom. I know you're so busy. Tom, has anything happened?" "In a way, Nothing unpleasant, love. Just a change. I'll tell you tomorrow. I heard footsteps outside, then the creak of the letterbox opening. I said goodbye to Amelia and ran to the front door to see Deirdre walking quickly down the street. I ran after her, still in my slippers, and grabbed her arm. "Get off me," she said. "I've finished with you." "But I haven't finished with you. If you don't let go my arm, I'll scream. I've been trying to get you on the phone. Only now, is it? I know how long you've been back. I saw your car 4 days ago." I released her arm. "Come on. I can't talk to you out here." She rubbed her arm. "I'll do the talking. You're the most selfish, self-centered, conceited, cold-hearted bastard I've ever met in all me born days, and that's just a start." A very old woman, Kensington is full of very old women, had stopped muttering to herself and was listening intently. "Do come on," I said. "That old girl's turning up her hearing aid." "I don't care," Deirdre said. "I'd just like you to be shown up. What the hell are you smiling about?" "I'm happy." She looked at me intently for a minute, then smiled, and we both went into the house. The old woman pulled a face and walked off in the opposite direction, muttering to herself again. "Why are you happy?" she asked. I put my hands gently to her cheeks. They were cold, but also, in a way I can't explain, radiated warmth. "I think I feel better with you here than not here. I might even love you." "Thank you. You have a damned queer way of showing it." "I'm too old to change." I took her coat off. She was wearing a green jersey wool mini-dress. "Come to bed." She moved away from me. "You, with all your money, and you can't afford a calendar." "It doesn't matter. Just sit beside me a minute." "You've been to see Miranda, haven't you?" I nodded. "What happened?" "I'll tell you about it later. Make some tea. I'm fed up with making my own." "Did you enjoy seeing her?" "No. You put it off too long. There's someone else whom you should see, isn't there?" "Are you going to put that off?" "I've just found her." "When are you going to see her?" "Soon. I'll arrange it with her tomorrow." "You won't, you know. You'll put it off." "Make me some tea and stop nagging." "Promise me to arrange it tomorrow, then." "I've told you. I'll do it tomorrow." "I don't trust you." "God, you're an awful man. You talk about loving people. How the hell can you love them if you don't see them? Why didn't you arrange it when you phoned her?" "Oh, stop nagging. You haven't been here 5 minutes, and you're bloody nagging. I hate nagging women." She stood up. "I'll go, then." "No," I said. "You may as well stay." "I'm going to make the tea," she said. I thought I heard her crying in the kitchen, but when she returned I could see no traces of it on her face. "I want us to move from here," she said. I stroked her hand. "If that's what you want, I suppose that settled it." "It's too much a bachelor's den, not the place for children. And I've been thinking about Giles. It's not right for you not to see him." "Oh, God," I said. "Where will you stop?" "If you don't see him regularly, then one day you'll just have to see him. And then you'll be hurt, like you were when you saw Miranda. You just pick people up, Tom, and then put them down. You don't see them for years, and you expect them not to change. You'll have to see Miranda again, Tom, else you won't remember her. Not properly remember her. Not remember her as she really is." Deirdre was right, and Deirdre was wrong. I shall see her again, but even if I don't see her again, I shall remember her. If I don't remember her, I shall remember nothing else. I shall cease to be a writer, for what else is writing but remembering, waking from the dream to seize the pen from the bedside? I don't want to end the story at this point. I want to go back into the dream. But I know that I won't go back into the same dream, and perhaps it's best that it should be so, because this dream is full of danger. The truth takes me too deep. Another dive, and my lungs would burst. All right for some. It wouldn't be your lungs, would it? And so I end the story. But after I've ended it, there, that town by the sea still is. There, Miranda still is, an old woman now, still queen of a country which seems to me increasingly distant with the passing of time and the change of our philosophies, but still with the same authority, still with, there's no other word for it, the same magic. I find her new court less than dazzling, and her new creed harsh and deadly, but that's of no account. She won't finish her book, but that's of no account either. I believe that I've progressed further than she, that my kingdom is larger, because I have given up more, am even now prepared to give up as much again. And I say that, having more when I least expected it, surprised by love when I had almost expected to live without it. That's a separate consideration. It isn't a judgment upon her, nor has it anything to do with pity, for I love Miranda inescapably. She and I share the same secret, even if we haven't fully comprehended it, even if, because of the limitations of our species rather than of our aspirations, we never will. This concludes the reading of The Queen of a Distant Country by John Braine. This book was read by Stuart Courtney.